what we're looking at here, we're looking at the HVAC system in more detail. And then we're also looking at the various parts of the HVAC system and how we can upgrade those parts to make it more efficient as well. And you'd actually be very surprised. There's quite a bit of room here that we can use for improvement as well. So in this particular section, or this particular module, or third module, but it's labeled number 2, we'll be looking at our furnaces or heat pumps, any alternative sources of heating and heat exchangers that we may want to get into. Thermostats and control. How you control your system is extremely important. And then we'll also talk about some extras and some add-ons to your home that can help you with the management of your home as well. So we're getting through nicely. We're getting up there, which is great. Now, if you look at these 2 donut charts that I have here, these are usually addenda that come out of the report from an energy evaluation. And what this tells you, this is a breakdown that the advisor would do, but what this would tell you is kind of where your energy is being spent most. So they may tell you things like, 90% of your energy is going to space heating, which just really means to keep your home warm. Or they may say, 20% of your energy is going to water heating, which is the hot water that you wash your hands with and stuff like that, or take a shower with, or anything like that, right? Or even your dishwasher or whatever have you, right? So they are able to kind of take an itemized look at the different parts of your home and how they are performing. And they're actually able to kind of give great detail on that as well. So that's one of the parts of the report that's pretty useful, but like I said, the entire thing is very useful as well. Now, in this section, there are 2 new pieces of jargon that we'll be going through. First one is the EAR, the Energy Efficiency Rating, or the Energy Efficiency Ratio. Sometimes that's called a Seasonal Energy Efficiency Ratio as well. That's really all about your cooling equipment and how well it can perform. So that discusses that in detail. And that's an actual number. And the closer to 20 you are, is generally the more efficient the system is. And then you also have the fuel utilization value, or annual fuel utilization value, which is the opposite. That's for heating equipment. And that is generally all about how well a piece of equipment can take some sort of a fuel and turn it into actual thermal energy that can be used, actual heat that can be used to heat your home, right? So of course that would be your boilers and your tankless water heaters and stuff like that, right? Now here's another case from the exercises that NRCan does. And you can see here there are 2 big areas in this example. And this is actually pretty typical of a lot of homes. A lot of the energy, I would say roughly about 75%, goes to space heating. And then I would say a large section after that, probably about maybe 10% in some cases, goes to water heating, right? So these are 2 areas, if you're able to target and kind of bring that down a bit, these are 2 areas that can bring you that bang for buck that I mentioned, so to speak. You can see some of the numbers and kind of work those numbers here. As well, right, in this particular example. Now, any furnace equipment, any heating equipment that is, I would say, approaching just about 15 years, in the coming years, you definitely want to think about an end-of-life replacement, because they generally last between, I would say, between 13 and 17 years, with some outliers. There's some brands and some units that may last way longer than that, and there's some that would die way before that. So it just kind of depends on a number of different factors. But generally, if you're sitting in that range for your furnace equipment or your heating equipment, you want to consider, a replacement in time as well. Now, one of the things that happens with those units as well, especially without any servicing or without any cleaning of the internals, what happens is that combustion efficiency starts to diminish. What I really mean by that is the way that it heats, or how well that it can heat, it kind of decreases slowly over time. So you have to keep servicing it, make sure that all the heat exchanger equipment and all that, all those areas are clean and functioning as they should, to ensure that you can kind of keep this fuel utilization value up, right? Remember, fuel utilization value is all about how well it can take a fuel and kind of heat your home with that fuel. And you don't essentially want to be losing any heat to any fuel, because that's product that you have to pay for, right? So the less of this that you can waste, you kind of get some savings here out of this as well. Now, another thing that you can do in discussions with your energy advisor, you can also do a heat loss calculation. Now, that's a specialized calculation. And what that really does is that essentially looks at your home specifically, calculates the number of windows, number of doors. It calculates something called load. What that really means is how much heat is going to take to warm your home to a particular temperature in various weather conditions. And what they're looking for there is they're looking to size your HVAC system to suit your home. The reason for that is undersize, and you're not going to be able to keep up in the temperature extremes. On a really hot day, you're going to be feeling really hot and humid and stressed on the inside. On a really cold day, you're going to be feeling really cold and shivery on the inside. And that's if your system is undersized. You don't want it to be undersized. Oversized, you're going to feel it in your pocket. That's where everything is going to be appearing to be normal, but you're paying more than you should because your system is heating 2 homes when it really is heating 1. It's kind of oversized for its use. So neither of those are things that you want. So you want to kind of stay in the middle kind of ground. You want to be just in that sweet spot where it's just right for your home, and it can keep up with whatever load is thrown at it, whatever heat demand or cooling demand the home is calling for, it can actually satisfy that, right? So that's one of the things it's beneficial there with that calculation as well. Now, in terms of your furnaces, if you're thinking of a replacement, one of the things I could suggest is to look for, and usually hardware stores and other suppliers will label their best in each class. Sometimes that label will be Energy Star. Sometimes that label would be best in class. They have a number of different labels that they use, but generally what you're looking for here is you're looking for the most efficient in class. And usually an advisor will be able to give you some more information on that. And usually the most efficient in class has a number of different features that can help it to be that most efficient in class. So the first one is usually it has a sealed combustion chamber. And in some cases, it also has staged combustion as well, 2 heat exchangers instead of 1. Now, what that really means is when it takes some fuel and it ignites it, and it draws all the heat out of that fuel being burnt, what it does, it goes to a secondary area and then draws even more heat out of that fuel being burnt. So it draws as much heat as possible out of that combustion process so that the waste gases that are coming out are basically even cooler than room temperature. And that's because you just extracted so much energy from it. So it's a better, more efficient process in that regard. And that can inherently improve your energy efficiency 15%. The fact that they're using new materials, new components, a different way of operation compared to the older models, you immediately get some savings there. Now, some other things that the newer models have, they have an exhaust fan. Exhaust fan helps to keep the combustion area nice and flooded with nice, clean, fresh air. And that's one of the things that you want for efficient combustion. You need fresh air to be able to support that chemical reaction. If you don't have enough air, essentially you're going to kind of rob the furnace of energy, so to speak, which is not something that you want. If you have too much air, same thing. You really don't want that, right? So you're kind of making sure that it's kind of a balance in terms of air for that combustion process. Now, you also have flame modulation in some of the better units as well. Flame modulation just really means if it's a really cold day, you have a tiny little mechanism, and that mechanism will allow for delivering more heat. And then on a warmer day, let's say it goes from -10 down to, or up to like -1 or so, what will happen is that mechanism will adjust itself, and now it will deliver less heat. So it doesn't have to do as much work. So it kind of goes in tandem with whatever's happening with the home. Colder days require more energy. warmer days require less energy. So this is something that can help us as well. With the older units, you really couldn't control that. You know, the furnace was just on or off, and that was it. And generally, the thermostat will kind of control the time in between. But that was generally it. On, off, and that was it, right? So one of the things there that can help with that. Variables, fan speed settings, and flame modulation. And variable fan speed setting just really means you can kind of turn the fan up for more airflow, turn it down for less airflow as well. So these are all features that help with energy efficiency, especially for furnaces. Now, when it comes to air conditioning units, you have a number of features here that are useful as well. First of all, to start off, air conditioning units have a compressor in them to compress refrigerant. And that's how, you know, when you compress a refrigerant, it looks to absorb heat. So that's what keeps your home nice and cool. It absorbs the heat from your home. And generally, if you're using a better, more efficient compressor, that immediately brings savings. So some of the newer models, the efficiency models, they have a better compressor, and usually that comes with a better warranty as well, right? So that's something that is just off the bat useful. Now, you'll remember the 2000s where we had some refrigerants that were banned, and they were banned because of something called their global warming potential. It just really meant that they weren't generally the most environmentally friendly. Now, with the newer models of AC units, what they use is they use a refrigerant that's really eco-friendly. And another thing is that it absorbs more heat for the same amount of refrigerant than some of the older models, and that's refrigerant 32, R32, essentially. There's some other blends of refrigerants out there as well that they're kind of playing around with, but that's generally the best one so far, right? So a bit more of an efficient refrigerant, that's something that immediately helps with savings. So it helps to cool your home better. Your AC unit doesn't even have to run as long as it would have with an older refrigerant to cool down the entire home. And then on top of that, it helps with the AC units to increase their SEER and their air. Remember, that's all about efficiency and how well they can cool. Right, so there are a number of things here, a number of dynamics here at play that help these units to be more efficient. And if you're thinking of a replacement for your air conditioner, these are some of the things that you should be looking for so that you can incorporate these. These are some of the things that will help you to be most efficient as well. Now, another system, and this is a third alternative system that can be helpful for homeowners. It can be what you call a heat pump system. Now, a heat pump is just that. It takes heat or energy from one place and puts it to the other. So it just displaces energy from one place to the other. And it does that in a number of different ways. You can have something called an air source heat pump. You can also have a ground source heat pump, and you can also have a water source heat pump as well. And all three of them, they work a little bit differently, but the kind of concept behind them is generally the same. Now, with an air source heat pump, that's really just a big specialized, I wouldn't call it an air handler. What I'll call it is a heat exchanger. And what that will do, that will harvest the energy in that air that's passing over that heat exchanger, and it will then use that to heat your home. And then if you switch the system into reverse, it will then do the opposite. So it can cool your home using that as well. And that's one of the great features of heat pumps. It can heat or cool your home, and it can do it in reverse depending on how you set it or depending on whatever setting you put it on. So it gives you a lot of functionality that you can use. Now, with a ground source heat pump has those same heat exchangers that I mentioned, but those heat exchangers are then connected to like a piping system, and that piping system is then buried into the earth. And the reason for that is the Earth's core, the Earth's mantle, it actually produces a lot of heat, and that heat radiates outwards from the core all the way to the surface where we stand. So if we can somehow get down into that earth, essentially mud, if we can get down there, this means digging a hole, we can actually harvest a lot of that heat that radiates out of the earth's core. And that's how a ground source heat pump works. It has water in it, sometimes water with an additive, and then it uses the energy around it in the ground to just grab onto that energy and take it and put it inside of your home, and that's what helps to heat your home. And then if it works in reverse, it takes that energy and puts it back into the mud, essentially, right? So like I said, it can work in reverse, and that's one of the things that's useful as well. Now with a water source heat pump, and I have an image here, a schematic here on the right-hand side, it works by the premise of, or works closely with a body of water somewhere nearby. So if you have an off-grid home or a cottage or something of that nature, and it's close to a river or a lake, or even just a swampy, boggy area, and you're permitted to install a system like this, you can actually use that water for heat exchange as well, for heating and cooling the same way, right? Now, this water will never get into your home in any way. It's just that your system will use that water for heating and cooling, and that's the only way it comes into contact with it, right? So it doesn't actually use it for anything. It's just using the energy that that water possesses more than anything else. So it's a relatively good system to install. Now, the way that you use a heat pump system is you use it as the middle ground between your AC and your furnace. Your shoulder seasons, generally, spring and fall, that's when you use your heat pump most generally. Let's say, for example, outside was about, 25 today or so. Let's say if this warms up your home to the point where, it feels like it needs cooling. It feels like you need to turn the AC on. Well, instead of going to the actual AC, what you can do is you can go to the heat pump and use the heat pump for cooling. And the reason why you'll do that is the heat pump can satisfy those cooling needs, but it's not as powerful as your full AC unit. So it doesn't have to do as much work as your AC unit would have to do, but it's enough for a day that's 25 or so. Now, let's say when it goes up to 45 in the Julys and the Augusts and the Septembers and stuff like that, now that's when you'd need your air conditioner unit, because your heat pump would no longer be able to keep up with that, right? So you can kind of use it as a system that kind of helps you to bridge the gap in between. Same thing with heating as well. Let's say maybe tonight it goes down to -2 and your home needs some heating. You could use your heat pump for that if you have one installed. And then if it somehow goes down to -12 or -15, well, that's when your furnace will cut in and take over and say, okay, heat pump, you can't handle this job anymore. I'm going to take over from here, right? So that's essentially how you can use a heat pump system, so that, you only use your conventional systems in extremes. So it gives you more functionality that you can use and you can tap into, which can help you to save a lot of energy as well, right? So very useful system there. And that's how it looks, essentially. Now, the good thing here is this can save you up to, sometimes more, 45% energy. And this is what is called a non-assessed measure. So it means that if you wanted to install a heat pump system at your home, and only that, you don't have to have those energy evaluations that I mentioned. If you're only looking to install a heat pump, you can go ahead and do that, and you can be rebated for it. And the rebates for this up to $12,000, right? So a bit of a rebate here, but that's really just is how involved this is. You'll have to do a little bit of kind of moving around things, maybe some construction work, depending on your home. Not really in-depth, intense construction, just really to kind of get those refrigerant lines where they need to be and stuff like that, right? So there will be some rejig in here. So this is a non-assessed measure. And, this is something that can be very useful as well. Like I said, there's several different types. There's the water source, ground source, air source. Then you also have the cold climate heat pumps as well, right? So a number of different options here for homeowners. Now, here's a schematic of what it looks like. Like I said, it can work in reverse. It's just really an air conditioned unit. A specialized air conditioning unit is what it is. And air conditioning units just usually have 4 components. You have the part that gives off the heat, the part that absorbs the heat, then you have the part that deals with the refrigerant, and then the part that helps to kind of, manage the refrigerant, helps the refrigerant to expand, so to speak, right? 4 main parts, and like I said, these can work in reverse, and this will help the system to do either heating or cooling, right? So it's the benefit of a heat pump. the functionality that you have. Now, another thing that you can do here with your heat pump as well is it can actually suffice your hot water needs by way of integrating it with your water heating system. Right. Now, there's a rebate for this. I think it's just about $500. This has been some things that homeowners go towards as well, because it means now that you're integrating your water system, you kind of get rid of your water heater, so to speak, and just using one system for, heating all of your resources, right? So some persons like the idea of that. For others, it doesn't work as well. It just depends on what your interests are, what you're comfortable with. But like I said, the homeowners here kind of make the decisions on that. Now, here's another item that's really helpful and really useful: a smart thermostat. And when I say a smart thermostat, I mean one that you can control with remote control. So that remote control could be a specialized remote that it came with, or it could be your phone. Some thermostats have apps that you can actually log into your thermostat, and you could be on the West Coast, you could be in Vancouver or Victoria or one of those, chatting with your friends. And as you're chatting with your friends, you're turning down the temperature in your home. And that's because no one is home, so you don't necessarily need to heat to 26 or 27. You could go down to 17 or something like that. Right, so smart thermostats are really useful in that regard, because it gives you another set of added functionality that you can use to help save energy as well. Right, now, if you do replace your thermostat yourself, like I said, this is something that a technician can do, but if you do replace it yourself, you'll see a number of different wires there, especially when you take it off the wall. And what you'll be looking at when you do that is you'll be looking at essentially the different parts of your HVAC system that it controls. It controls each individual system, individually, and then it kind of uses them in tandem to do what it needs to be done. So yellow would be your cooling, your white would be your heating, your furnace, blue would be your humidity control if you have that, if that's enabled. Green would be the fan, and so on, right? So it's just really about matching wires and making sure they're well connected. So it's relatively an easy install if you have some prior knowledge as well, right? I've had clients that kind of watch videos and kind of figured it out from there. Now, the good thing here is you get a rebate for this, $75. This is a non-assessed measure as well. So it means that you don't have to have those energy evaluations. So if you just change your thermostat, and I think it's valid from the beginning of 2025 to the end of 2025, if you've changed your thermostat any time in that time frame, you submit your documentations, you are eligible for $75 back, right? That's the rebate for any smart thermostats that you've installed. Now, another option here, tankless water heaters. I'm sure you know someone that has had a water heater rupture and flooded their basement or flooded some other part of their home. Or it might have even happened to you, unfortunately. Well, the good news here is that you can now get rid of a water tank system. It doesn't hold any water. This tankless water heater here is a system that only heats water as you're using it. And instead of carrying a tank where it has to constantly heat the water in that tank, what it does is connect it directly to your hot water plumbing. And as water flows through that system, which means that someone has opened a hot water tap somewhere, that's when it starts to heat. Now, there's a standby time here with this. It takes a couple minutes, generally in mornings, but that's when it's getting itself ready for the entire day. So, if you are thinking of the system, that's something to take into account as well. It's not necessarily something that's particularly disruptive, but it is a factor that some people do notice, right? So there's that as well. The good thing here, the benefits, I think, outweigh the costs. It reduces the amount of water that you have to store in the home. And then on top of that, it reduces those heating costs because you don't have to keep heating that water. And the example that I love to use is your kettle. If you put your kettle on now and boil yourself some hot water, let's say you're making a cup of tea, your water is going to be nice and steaming. But if you come back to that water in, let's say, 4 or 5 hours, that water is cold again. It's back to room temperature. It's lost its energy. And the same thing is happening with the water that you shower with, or that's going to the washing machine or the dishwasher or whatever have you, right? So that's something to consider as well. It helps to reduce water costs, and it helps to reduce electricity and energy costs as well. And how it reduces water costs, you don't have to run the water anymore to get it warm. You don't have to just open the tap and let the water warm up. It's generally ready to go as is, right? So something that's particularly useful. Now here is a look at the final non-assessed measure. And non-assessed measure means that you don't need those energy evaluations that I mentioned. You can do it outside of that. But this is a solar PV system, photovoltaic, a system that you can actually use to generate electricity on your premises. Now, about 10 years ago, 8 years, I think, there used to be a system where you could actually install this and generate electricity to the grid for a sum of money. But they've since paused that program, and it's been paused so long, I dare say that it's been ended. That's the feed-in tariff, micro feed-in tariff program. What they're targeting now with systems like this, bigger buildings like warehouses and industrial complexes and stuff like that, which can generate a little bit more than a home would be able to. It has a little bit more space. So with this particular setup here, what is suggested or recommended is to allow the solar panels to charge a battery, and then you will have a control switch. I actually personally have a control switch in my home, but the control switch will determine where that electricity is going. So when the battery is full, it'll then divert electricity directly to the home. And then once the sun stops shining, like the sun goes down and is no longer producing electricity, the switch will then transfer over to battery power so that you use that battery overnight. And then you'll use it until it diminishes, where it then switches over to grid power. So this is just really all about several different options you have here. And this is something that can be very useful to you, which can help you to save a lot of energy, a lot of money. And think of it like this. Think of it as buying all of your electricity up front. And what I usually tell clients to consider is that you know the cost of this system right now, but do you know the cost of electricity into the lifespan of the system, which is generally about 22-ish years, 25-ish years, in that range. And you can actually calculate it. If you consider what you spend per year on electricity now and multiply that by 22 to 25-ish years, you get a ballpark figure. And then you usually compare that to the cost of the solar PV system. And you can kind of do the math on that. Generally, solar PV is usually cheaper, but like I said, it depends on so many different factors. So you have to do some analysis here to see if this is something that will work for you. But the main thing here is A, it's a non-assessed measure. B, you get up to $10,000 back without those energy evaluations on a system like this. And C, free electricity, right? Who could say no to free electricity, right? So this is another thing that you can consider as well as a homeowner, and something that can be particularly useful. All right. Now to end off our mechanical section, there are great benefits there. So a ground source heat pump can save you up to between, I would say, 60 and 70%. Your air source heat pump can save you up to 30, 35% in that general realm. Furnace can get you about 25% savings. So that's if you upgrade your furnace, right? So a number of different options here and things to consider, right? So lots of great work in this section. Right, so we've come to the end of section number 3, module number 2. So I wanted to check in with Chelsea to see where we are and what we're doing so far.
We have a couple questions about some potential new technology. So someone asked, are there safe ways to capture heated air from clothes dryers without adding too much moisture to the house?
That would be by way of a heat exchanger. But to be honest with you, what you would go through to install that and to set up a system like that and stuff like that, generally the numbers don't really point to it being beneficial. It would be a great savings. Yes, it's a lot of heat that comes out of there, but compared to what you'll spend installing a system. If you're doing it yourself, sure, you can absolutely do that. But if you have to pay someone to install a system like this, it's gonna kind of throw those numbers out of whack a bit. One of the things that you can consider is one of those drain heat exchangers. So the water coming out of your shower that goes down the drain, you could think of harnessing that heat. You could use that around the drain pipe if it's accessible. That's something you can consider as well. Depends on the material of your pipe as well, because some of them do block the heat. So it just really depends on a number of different things. But sometimes with applications like that, it doesn't necessarily justify the numbers. If it were something like a commercial laundry or something, yeah, absolutely, it would definitely work. But not if you have like one or two dryers in your home, and most homes have generally one dryer.
Okay, and then we have another question about underfloor heating, specifically if it would save heating costs and improve comfort when you step out of the shower onto a tile or marble slab that has some sort of heating on it.
It definitely improves comfort, that's for sure. In that situation, I can't say if it will increase efficiency, because what will impact efficiency there more is the heat coming from that floor. Are you able to keep it in the home? So how is your envelope performing along with that? It's not going to make sense heating the floor if cold air is still getting in, right? And kind of making that system run a bit longer, especially if it can sense the temperature in the room, right? So that kind of has to be done with some in tandem upgrades.
And the question asker is also wondering if there's any safety issues with underfloor heating that you could comment on.
I'm not an expert in that area. I can't think of any. Generally, the systems with the piping and the way they're piped, generally that's all taken into account. I can't think of any risks. I can't bring any to mind at the moment. I can't recall hearing any issues with any of them. But like I said, an expert in that area would have a little bit more information than I would. But generally, yeah, I can't think of hearing any issues. Yeah.
That's all we got.
Okay, great questions there. I like these questions coming in. Yeah, they're really, really thoughtful questions, thought-provoking.